All right. So please hear me out. And this is the crazy thing that you see something very funny. Let me explain. Akintola wanted to remove the flat rate, wanted to abolish the flat rate taxes on women. Now, again, because we're trying to understand this book, not trying to destroy anything, just understand. Listen to what he says here. Professor Jotoko says, the government also abolished payment of taxes by women, a decision which was very popular at the time because of the agitation against women paying taxes since the measure was introduced during the dying days of Awolowo's administration. All right, that's a very, very interesting way to put it, but let me explain what's really happening here. We've already read how everybody was shouting Awo. Sure, you remember, Abi? How everybody was shouting Awo, and we talked about what the drivers told themselves, the Awolowo's driver and Akintola's driver, and the information that he got from Akintola's driver. So we are on the same page, Abi. So here's where it gets interesting. Everywhere you went, people were shouting, ow, 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 ow. Now, you want to ensure that, and it's natural, by the way, this is human. But you know, one of the laws of power, I think it's even the very first law from Robert Greene. I'm not saying it is a factual book. You may not like it. Some people say it's demonic. I thought the same thing about 20 years ago when I first saw the book, but it ain't. I just wasn't ready for the facts and the stuff. One of the laws is that never outshine your master. Anybody knows that law? Have you ever heard about it? I'm going somewhere because I'm going to see how interesting this is in a second. I'm trying to find a way to say this thing without, I don't want to make anybody appear bad. Never outshine the master. So here's what Akintola was trying to do. I'm not saying it's good or bad. Just make of it whatever you will. Everywhere you went, you heard about this great man. Again, Awolowo was larger than life. It was difficult to live at the same time with that kind of person, right? Because everything he did, it made whatever you are doing pale in significance. When in comparison, when you compare what you are doing with what he is doing, it's as if you are doing nothing, even though you are doing the best. So here's the problem. Here's the point. If I want to make sure that two things, I become more popular, what do I need to do that will transcend what he has done or he is doing? So the first thing that this man had in mind was to remove the flat rate tax on women. But here's the question. Where were those women? Was the tax on women across Yorùbá land? No. Was the tax enforced in Oyo division or Osun division, any of the or in Western or Midwest in Benin and Delta provinces? No. Guess where where the flat rate tax was on the women? Awolowo's backyard. Ijebu, Remo, and Egba. If you as a politician go to Awolowo's backyard, essentially, because Awo is from Ikene, which is Ijebu Remo. Ijebu Remo is closely linked to Ijebu, so they're essentially one. Egba is just beside them, and with the three regions or three provinces paying that tax, if you remove that tax, what do you think you are saying to his people? Forget whether it's even making you feel anything, but please, we are not Ijebu, we are Remo. You are not listening to what I'm saying, no. Calm down. Nothing. There's nobody that fights for you to be Remo than me. Trust me. Calm down. He is Remo, right? But Remo and Ijebu are connected. Do you understand? You can never break the fact that there was a time when Remo was under Ijebu, when they were under the sovereignty of Aujale before the Akarigbo. Now, this was in the 1860s there, or 1860s, 1880s thereabout, when I say, we're going to have our own and just be Remo, and then Akarigbo will be the paramount ruler and not longer under Ijebu. But up until the early 20th century, people saw that, in fact, that was one of the major issues in the 1930s that affected the chances of the man who eventually became the Odemo of Ishara. That's Obasama Akinsoya, because the Remo people were trying to assert that thing, like, guys, we are not Ijebu, and what's the word? I was supporting the Jebu to still be Jebu. Again, that's neither here nor there. But the conversation I'm having right now is this: how is Remo? Remo is connected to Jebu people. Egba is just beside them. These are the only three provinces in the entire Western region where the women were paying that flat rate. If you abolish that flat rate in that place, you are sending a message. You are saying that your own hates you, I love you. So here's the point I'm trying to make. You are trying to make him look bad in his own constituency by removing that flat rate. You don't think that is political? The point is that the plan that Akintola had, number one, it wasn't very financially wise. We're going to get into it, if not today, much later. But beyond that, it was also a plan to diminish Awo in his own space, so that he then, of course, becomes popular there. It was a political move, essentially. So, only Chief Akintola pointed out that due to my so he now came and said, okay, let me go back a bit. There were only 3 divisions in which the latter kind of, let's say provinces, I meant divisions. There were only 3 divisions in which the latter kind of tax was paid in the whole of the Western region: Egba division, Ijebu division, and Ijebu Remo division. In these 3 areas, the flat rate tax on women was 5 shillings, 10 shillings, and £2 respectively. In other words, in Egba, the women paid 5 shillings. In Ijebu, they paid 10 shillings, and then in Ijebu Remo, that's Awolowo's own place, they paid £2. Which means that Awolowo was taxing his own women more than all the other women in the Western region. So think about this. So Egba division was paying 5 shillings, Ijebu division was paying 10 shillings, Ijebu Remo division, which is Awolowo's constituency because it was Kene, they were paying £2. Which means that Awo was taxing his own women more than the women in those 3 divisions, and he was not even taxing other women across Western region apart from those 3 divisions. Oh, sorry, he was taxing his own women more than the women in the other 2 divisions, and those 3 were the only ones paying that tax, more, and no other woman in any other division in Western region was paying taxes. So it says in these 3 areas the flat rate was 5 shillings, 10 shillings, and £2 respectively. In parentheses, it is useful to know that I am an Ijebu and that my parliamentary constituency was Ijebu Remo, a phratry of Ijebu tribe. Chief Akintola point. So the point is that I will not mention that statement for the reason why all my Turenchi was to say it is useful to note. It says in parentheses, it is useful to know that I am an Ijebu and that my parliamentary constituency was Ijebu Remo, a phratry of Ijebu tribe. So if you go to my people and say I will buy £2 lọ́wọ́ yín, tí ń gọ́tẹ̀ tí wọ́n á pọ̀ ju àwọn ti Ìjẹ̀bú àti àwọn Ẹ̀gbá lọ, nǹkan tí mo fẹ́ ṣe fún yín sì ni pé nǹkan tẹ́yìn sọ yẹn má ti rà sọ́mọ́ kẹ̀dà bí àwọn tó wà lọ́yọ̀ọ́ àbáwọn tó wà ní Benin àbáwọn tó wà ní Warri, gbogbo yóò ní san owó orí mọ́. Messiah wa ti dé o. Àwọn náà rí ọ̀ burúkú gangan ni bàbá tó pè láwo lọ́wọ́ yẹn. That's the plan. By the way, Awolowo is not your burúkú, in case somebody goes to cut that part out. Let's go on. Chief Akintola pointed out that due to my prudent management, the finances of the region were strong. Accordingly, it was not right in his view that the people of the region should continue to be subjected to heavy flat rate tax, as was then the case. The region was affluent and its economy was buoyant. He felt strongly that the people should be made to have a share of the prevailing affluence. In other words, etiko pamo owo wa nle. If you read this book, this man is saying that there's no money. This man. Owo wa nle. Owo yakpa. Ija no way kitarafuye. They say there's a lot of money. Let's share it with the people. Let the people have a share of the prevailing affluence. Chief Odebiyi, who is Chief Odebiyi? He was the Minister of Finance. Chief Odebiyi then spoke. He said that he had advised against the Premier's proposals, but obviously in vain. He thought that before a final decision was taken, my views should be consulted, hence the meeting. In my contribution, I made 4 points. First, these actions would amount to a vote of no confidence in the former administration which in the midst of the region's affluence had insisted that the people should bear the burden of rates and taxes. That's the very first point. Again, these actions would amount to a vote of no confidence in the former administration, which is Awo's administration, which in the midst of the, in other words, when we're having money, we're telling our people to pay taxes. Why? You're going to build this and build that and build this. Cocoa House is going to be built. You're going to build the University of Ife. You're going to build this. You're going to build that. Where will you get that money from? Say, oh, because you have a lot of money, we don't have to pay taxes again. So if you say don't pay taxes again, you are now voting. Your actions will amount to a vote of no confidence in our administration. That's one. Second, it was true that the region's finances were good and strong at the time, but any weakening of the existing position would be imprudent and short-sighted. Should any financial difficulties arise in the future, as they do in all human affairs, the government would find itself unable to cope with them as effectively as it might have been able to if the proposed actions had not been taken. Third, in a developing economy such as ours, people should be educated to expect to bear an increasing financial share in the state. Once tax was reduced, people would be encouraged to expect further reduction rather than an increase. How true? If the present affluence ceased and it became necessary to call upon the people to pay additional tax, even if it was less than the amount of a previous reduction, the government would be confronted with stiff opposition. The saying was as true as ever: no tax is as good as an old tax. In other words, say they were paying £10. You tell them that you have this altruism, you want to reduce it to £8. If something that happens in government and you want to increase that tax to £9, the people will rise against it. Why? Because they're already used to paying £8. They will expect to pay maybe £6 next time, or £5, or £4, or £3. Since we're all running this economy way, like this is what's happening in Nigeria right now. You hear people saying things like, see what happened in Germany, see what happens in Norway, nobody pays for anything, you just have this thing. In the UK, if you go there now, you see how people are taken care of. No mention of taxes. This is what you do if you want populism. You want to be loved by the people, right? You want to be popular. So the idea is, if you remove this thing and something happens, where are you going to get more money? Again, this was before where you can be carrying hats in hand, going to Royal Capital and say, oh, yeah, come and give me money. You're supposed to fend for yourself. Let's continue. Fourth, it was well known that women in Nigeria were deeply averse to the payment of any kind of impost. But it was a studied policy of the last administration that they should be encouraged, where they were able, to share in contributing money into government coffers. The women in Egba, Ijebu, and Ijebu Remo divisions had responded to a considerable extent to government's gentle promptings in this regard. They had not complained, and they served as good examples for women in other parts of the region, who might be brought into their fold as soon as it was judged to be practical politics to do so. The abolition of flat rate tax on women would be a serious setback to this sound policy. At the close of my remarks, I stated that on those very vital issues, it was absolutely essential that the views of the party leaders should be consulted before any final decision or action was taken. Discussions were initiated immediately amongst party leaders. I was also planning to summon a joint meeting of the Regional Executive Committee and Parliamentary Council for some time in March. But on 7th March 1960, Chief Akintola announced his proposed reduction as well as abolition in the terms spelt out to us at the meeting in my house on 10th February 1960. He did this in the teeth of solid opposition from the vast majority of his colleagues inside and outside Parliament. His official advisors were also opposed to what was generally regarded as an extremely short-sighted and retrograde policy. What have we learned so far? Populism. So think about it. Say you want to do this. I'll always give you the reasons why you shouldn't. A meeting was fixed sometime in March. The first week of March, on the 7th of March, you announce as the premier. In other words, you and your advisors agree on that thing. The party doesn't agree with it. Majority of people in parliament don't agree with it, but you go ahead and you do it. And from what even you have said here while listening, is very short-sighted. But like I said, this is not the worst. This is just the beginning of the wala. It gets worse. And again, we're not doing this to say one person is bad, the other one is good. That's not the point of the conversation. I don't think it helps to think in that manner. But it's also important to understand the details, especially what's happening right now. Let me say what's happening. What's happening right now is that there are people who are putting out materials, books. I have a number of them. And I think it's good to do what they've done, right? To try to help people see the other side of SLA. Excuse me, by saying, oh, it wasn't as bad as you thought. There's something about it that you don't know. Let's go into this part and show him and read those things about him and, write those things. That's good. But what we should not do is rewrite the past because we want to whitewash somebody. That's unfair. We can learn from him, and we will. And next class, I'm going to play some of the things he said about the Igbos, what he said about how they are going to work against, Egbelakuko. All those things. We'll talk about that, next class. So we don't have to just throw the baby away with the bathwater and say, oh, Akintola is bad. Akintola is bad. That's an extreme. But we also don't have to go to the other extreme of saying, oh, he was a saint too. There were things that were done. And the reason this is important is not so we can blame Akintola. It's so we can learn, whether as leaders or as associates, that thing that makes people want to take the shine off their masters usually destroys the entire organization eventually. Never outshine the master is a very, very important rule in the court of power. Maybe in church it's not necessary, even in church it's necessary. When you come to power, just leave it be, rather than coming up with popular ideas in order to win people to your side. It never ends well. We're going to continue from here on Wednesday, but tomorrow we'll be here at 4 p.m. It's 4 now. 4 p.m. Ife time, West African time. We're going to get into there's a particular recording I'd like us to listen to. It's actually very, very, very good.